I'd like to welcome everybody to the Secrets of CRM Success, how to successfully select and implement a CRM system. This is part one, which is the introduction to this four-part series. I'm Rob Cates, executive producer at Cates Media. We work with lawyers and law firms to create videos and provide assistance with virtual programming. And I'll be the guy behind the curtain for today's webinar. Some quick housekeeping. If you have any questions, please place them in the Q&A box, and we will do our best to address them at the end of the program. This program is being recorded, and we will be sending you a link to the presentation as well as to the slides for your reference. Today, our speakers are going to take you through these topics to help you define success for your CRM initiative, assess your firm's CRM needs, plan effective strategies to help you achieve success, define milestones, and help you make a CRM strategy. As you can see, we have a lot to cover today. So without further ado, let's meet our speakers.
Thanks, Rob. Whit, McIsaac, everybody. I'm the founder of Legal 360 and the director of the vertical industry strategies for HSO ProServe worldwide, based in Atlanta. I've been involved with law practice technology now for a better part of 30 years. So looking forward to the session today, as well as the follow-up sessions. And Chris.
Hi, I'm Chris Fritsch. I am a CRM Success consultant. No, that is not an oxymoron, I swear. I'm also the founder of CLIENTSFirst Consulting, CRM Success and Data Quality Consultants. I'm also in Atlanta, but I'm on the other side of town from Whit right now. Looking forward to this as well.
Perfect.
I like to always start off with some bad news, right? We're gonna go steadily downhill from here, right? So for years, Gartner and all the pundits have all been saying 70+% of CRM implementations fail to meet expectation. Well, okay, that may be true, and certainly that results in a huge loss of not just money, but also the time and the resources that you put into this. And for those of us in the firms who are doing marketing and business development and who are sort of in charge of these programs, it can also mean a huge loss of credibility. But
from our standpoint, Chris, when we look at what Gartner and Forrester and all these groups say at the 70% number, if you actually take a magnifying glass and apply it to the legal market, I think you find some very unusual challenges, which we'll talk about here in a few minutes, that actually make this percentage higher in the outside world than in the legal world. So from that standpoint, I'll let you talk about some of the contributors.
Yeah, so they tell you that the systems don't meet expectations, but what they don't tell you is it's usually not the technology, it's that the expectations were wrong. And there are a lot of challenges to CRM success, and you're right, Whit, even more in our fun little vertical. But really, it's not the technology, it's people and process most of the time. It's dealing with change management or not dealing with change management, not having the leaders on board, not understanding the necessary resources or planning the rollout, the communication and the training, not figuring out how important the integrations are, and not focusing on and defining adoption. And a big piece of it is really failure to address the firm's needs up front. CRM can do a lot of things, but it really has to meet the firm's needs and value as your individual unique firm defines them.
Yeah, and I know it probably sounds like an awkward way to start the presentation, but it really, really is super important when we start talking about what the success of one of these initiatives looks like, to understand where the struggles and where the challenges are. So from our perspective, there's a handful of what I'll call hurdles or roadblocks or potential downfalls associated with these projects that when you're planning one of these scenarios, that you be ultra cautious about. So the number one most important thing is that if these systems aren't simple, If we don't design them for the lowest common denominator, the likelihood that we're going to be able to appeal to the people that we need to use these platforms is going to be minimal. So they have to be easy to use. They can't be too technical. Too much data entry. And we're going to touch on that throughout today's session. But if the success of this implementation or this initiative requires somebody to sit down and bang information into the computer, the likelihood that we're going to receive a lot of success is, again, limited. Data problems, so important that we're going to cover this in more detail on a separate session that's just specifically focused on this. But if I don't have any data, if the data I have isn't good data, and if it's not living data, which means it's continually updated based on the process associated with the implementation, people aren't going to use it. They're not going to have confidence in it. The next item, and again, we're going to cover this throughout the session. If we try to do too much, if we try to boil the ocean, the effort gets diluted. And Chris has got some great slides that talk specifically to that. But you'll hear us refer to crawl, walk, run, in some cases sprint, but not everybody sprints. Most people crawl. So we'll talk more about that. The other piece is, if the thought process is that we're going to implement a piece of technology that's going to affect change on the business, that's backwards. And we've got to use this technology to support what we're planning to do with the business or what the goals and strategies are surrounding the business. So this is a support platform that doesn't define change. It helps support what you're trying to do with your strategies.
Yeah, Whit, so many people, I always say, people think you plug it in, turn it on, and the clients line up at the conference room door with bags of money, and it just doesn't work that way.
Exactly right, exactly right. So enough of the bad, things that happen out in the marketplace. The good news is, and the reason we're here today is to talk specifically about how you guys can achieve success and how you can put the strategy in place to ensure that you're going to be successful with one of these initiatives. And Chris has got a great slide here that talks specifically about what she refers to as the elements of CRM success.
Yeah, so it starts with understanding your firm's unique needs. Whenever we work on a project, the first thing we do is called a CRM success assessment. And we sit down with stakeholders throughout the firm and talk through, what are the challenges now? What is what I call CRM nirvana look like? In a perfect world, what would it look like? And what are the problems? What are the issues? How does the firm define value? Because the only way you're going to get anybody to use the system is if it provides value to them. So during this process, you also want to set goals that are measurable and achievable and agreed upon by key stakeholders. And so the whole process is you just go after one goal at a time. And we talk about these things as a project or an initiative, but they're really not. CRM is not a discrete project, and that's where a lot of folks fall down, is thinking of it as a project that is done, and then we've got something else to do. We've got a website redesign, we've got a proposal generation system to implement, whatever it might be. But it's really important to define the goals, achieve the goals, get success, communicate the success, and then find a new goal. And that will help set realistic expectations so that, if your expectations are right, CRM is not going to fail to meet them. Also, so you can see a lot of this is humans. It's as much the humans as it is the technology. So you have to focus on communicating effectively throughout the process, training, and not just initial training, but ongoing training. You've got laterals coming in and people, coming and going, and different times of year, you have different things going on where you might need to do some additional training, and you just have to plan for that. And Whit's going to talk a lot more about how important integrations can be to automate as much as possible and minimize the effort of the attorneys, the assistants, and the rest of the staff. And of course, like Whit said, data quality, I can tell you as an attorney, if the data is bad, the system is bad, and I'm just not going to use it. So that's a key part of this. And then also putting together the right team and dedicating the right resources in terms of not just the money you're going to spend on the system, but also, the time and the human resources involved.
Yep, and Chris, I'm glad you're going to talk about the teamwork piece, because I think too many people get into the frame of mind where we've got some super technical people at the firm that really understand technology, and those people, unfortunately, a lot of times are the ones that lead and manage, and they assume that everybody else has the same technical aptitude that they have. So I'm glad you're going to be covering that here in just a little bit. So.
Yeah, and focus on it. People are like, where do I start? Well, start focusing on some of the key things that you need to do for success. Some of them happen to all start with P, right? Putting a plan in place based on the assessment of your needs, having the right people on board, making sure that you pick the right team, focusing on processes and procedures as much as the technology, and the change management is absolutely essential. And then find some problems to solve. So if you can solve problems and automate processes and really provide value, then you're going to be successful with this. But until you focus on the people, the processes, the problems, and some planning, you shouldn't even focus on products, right? So people, processes, and problems first, products second. And again, you're not going to focus on just go, let's go see demonstrations of all the systems. Well, until you know really what your needs are, it's just confusing. I had a client and they had me come in and they said, well, we bought this really fancy CRM system and it does a million things and we're using maybe 10% of the features. So we did a needs assessment, and it was a smaller firm and they didn't have a lot of huge goals. It was really list and event management. And I said, okay, every person I talked to said list and event management was your key thing. Why did you buy this behemoth of a system? And they said, well, every time we saw a demo, we saw something else that we thought, that's great, let's get that. Well, this is a cool feature, we want that. And when we got done, this system had them all. I said, yes, but it doesn't do list and event management the way you want to do it, and you're not using any of the other features. So, figure out your plan and your people and process and problems first, and then start seeing demonstrations.
And Chris, I'd like to say that was the minority of scenarios we run into. I think that's a situation that really plagues the industry as a whole, that they look to the demonstrations to help define what their needs are as opposed to doing it the other way around.
Yep. I mean, CRM can do 1,000 things, right? Here are a few of the things. I'm sure you can find a couple on this list that are important at your firm. The problem is it should probably do like 3, maybe only 1, and they're different for every firm, and they're different for groups within the firm, and they're different for sometimes individual attorneys within the firm. And I worked with a firm years ago in Pennsylvania, and the CMO had come in and was looking at the assessment, and I said, okay, it's time to go back to the managing partner, get the sign off, because he was really invested in this, and get the check, do whatever you need to do. And she comes back and she says, I don't want to do CRM anymore. I said, what do you mean? You've been working on this for like years. And she said, well, he just wants it to be a mailing list. And I just that's I want to do this and this and this and this and this. And I said, okay, did you get the check? And she said, yeah. And I said, how much was the check? She said, $300,000. And I said, how important do you think these lists are to him? Right? He wants the CRM. Do the list and event management in year 1. And then you've got all these other goodies that you can implement in the following year. So, you've got 1,000 things, just do them a few at a time.
Yeah, and a lot of discussion with firms when they get ready to launch these CRM initiatives, CRM strategies. They talk about phasing things or waving things in, but ultimately what happens is they try to jam too much stuff into phase 1, and again dilutes the effort, dilutes the team, just creates challenges. So I think that this probably sums it all up, right? With don't focus on the bells and whistles.
Yeah, exactly.
So, all right. So what should firms be doing? Where do you guide your clients?
Again, it's processes and problems, but anything that you can do to provide value. And so, part of the assessment is to understand how all the stakeholders define value. And, the way the attorneys define it is very different than, like you said, from the IT team
Right.
and the marketing and BD team and the accounting team, and of course, the assistants or secretaries. Everybody's got a different idea about what is value. Is it minimizing effort? Is it, maximizing relationships, facilitating business development? These are all important, but different stakeholders will care about different things. And your communication with them, in the assessment, when you identify what their needs and how they define value, all the communications throughout the rollout should hammer home those same messages, so that over and over again, they're seeing, we're implementing a CRM to help the firm achieve whatever it may be, but also to help the individuals achieve what they want to achieve.
Yeah, I think it was Rob that actually produced some of the sessions at LMA a couple of years ago, where they set up a boxing ring and took the lawyer users in one corner, the technical users in one, and marketing and business development, and everybody has their own goals and objectives. And unless all of those are weighed as part of this process, it's going to be difficult to get a solution that's going to be serving the entire firm. So very, very important when we start talking about who we want to get involved in helping to make sure that we're going to hit the target. So, all right, so let's talk about the success of these projects. And Chris, this slide is something that you've put together and we've been through many, many, many times. So talk to us about strategy.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, having done this for almost 15 years now, CRM has always been thought of as a tool, a piece of software, I hear glorified Rolodex, a database, whatever. But realistically, if you think about the marketing technology stack that has evolved over the last even 5, 6, 7 years, it's not just CRM anymore. CRM doesn't do everything that every firm needs. We're focused on all these different platforms. We've got starting with websites, and then we've got intranets and extranets, and we've got experience and proposal and the website, the CRM system and the ERM system, and all these different tools. We have to figure out, CRM, instead of being a tool, should be a strategy, client relationship management. And you might need a bunch of tools or 2 or 3 tools. You've got email marketing, you've got integrations with your time and billing system, you've got integrations to do experience and to put all that into a proposal and to be able to search. There are just so many things now to enhance business development that it's time to start thinking of it as multiple tools, and especially as a strategy. And one of the key pieces that has evolved over the last, say, 5 or 6 years is letting the lawyers be lawyers, using the ERM system to help automate as much as we can and minimize the billable effort, because in a law firm, time is money, literally. And if you've got attorneys doing data entry, it's probably not the highest and best use of their time. So if you can think of other ways to get this data into the system, you're going to have a win. What do you think, Whit?
Yeah, we did a project that started about 1.5 years ago, and in one of the very early meetings, is the primary stakeholders that were involved in the project started going through the whiteboard session, and they said the main assumption we want you guys to embark on is the lawyers are not going to put anything into the system. They're just not going to do it. So how far can you get with data harvesting, integration, synchronization? What can you build the system on without expecting the lawyers to change the way that they operate to support the use of this system? So I'll tell you, that puts things in an interesting perspective, and you have to focus on out-of-the-box type scenarios to make sure that you're able to accumulate the data that these users are going to want to consume. We'll talk more about that here in just a little bit. One of the other things that we talk about that ties back directly to CRM as a strategy, not as a system or a solution or a product, is this CRM train doesn't stop anymore. You don't start implementing a system in December, finish implementing the solution in April, and then take a deep breath and wait for 3 years. This technology is evolving and evolving very, very quickly, and the functionality and the content and the availability of information that's really valuable from a practice intelligence standpoint is, I mean, it's really intoxicating. So going into this thing with the thought process that we're going to start on this date and finish on this other date doesn't happen that way. This strategy keeps on moving, and if we can work with you all to help you figure out how to weave this strategy into the overall goals and business direction for the firm, then it becomes a really successful approach to a CRM initiative.
And where we see firms fall down is, again, we're back to thinking of it as a project or an initiative. And CRM never really ends, which is awesome because that means you've got forever to get better at it. But you have to think of it as, and this is where everybody falls down. If you think of it as a project, when you're done, then you go do something else. You can't think of it that way. You're always going to have new people coming on, training that needs to be done, new events and e-newsletters going out the door and pitches and activities. And it's just never going to end. So you have to think about the ongoing, strategy.
Yeah. So Chris, as you've seen over the years, firms, especially pre-COVID, so hopefully in the not too distant future, we're back to the mode where firms schedule these retreats, and with those retreats, they sit down and they spend days talking about how did we perform last year, what did we do right, what do we need to do better, and what do we want to do with the firm moving forward. I mean, they spend hundreds of thousands of dollars figuring those things out, but too many times they don't factor that research and analysis and decision making into what they want to do with these types of platforms. So if you're a law firm, where do you start to assess the firm and the lawyer requirements?
Yeah, I think you really do have to understand the unique needs of your firm and wrap the technology around that. And you actually may end up rolling CRM out in different ways within the same firm. Really smart firm we worked with years ago, and one group, and it's really difficult to get attorneys to enter activities. In the rest of the world, activities are one of the most promising features of CRM. But in law firms, we'll get the marketing activities. Who did we invite? Did they RSVP? Did they open our emails and things like that? But getting the lawyer activities can be really challenging. This firm had one group, a big group that drove the whole firm, and they had built an access database because the lead partner wanted to track activities. And so part of the reason they bought CRM was for his group. And, we took all of the reports that had been designed in the past and enhanced them and had them in CRM, put all the data in, and they were trained just on activity tracking. No contacts, no list management, nothing, just activity tracking. And their assistants put all their the contacts into the system, and they got the reports, and it was exactly what they needed. But in the labor and employment group, we rolled it out a completely different way.
Yeah. No, it's assessing the problems, right? So we did a project based out of London, and the problem that they had is the best way the firm had for understanding the relationship they had with the client and how strong the relationship was their reports out of the time and billing system. Were our billings up? Were our bills greater? Did we have more matters? What's the payment history? And so all of the analysis that they did with that client or those key clients were all based on financial metrics, as opposed to all that other super important stuff that goes into a client relationship. So being able to go through the goals and what the firm's trying to accomplish and identify where the problems or the lack of efficiencies are, and then factor that into the strategy is going to be super important. And again, we mentioned this a few minutes ago. We're going we're gonna try to hammer it home because it's super, super important. When you start talking about identifying what the firm needs to do with this type of a strategy, it's critically important that you have a diverse group of users associated with the analysis. So it can't just be a technical scenario or a business development or a marketing. Like you said, Chris, it can't be the workers' comp group versus the litigation group. It's got to be a mix of the individuals that have goals and objectives that they need to accomplish, and you need to take into account the feedback from all of those groups as you're starting to build this strategy. Also keeping in mind that using external consultants and advisors is a really good thing, and they've got a lot of experience understanding what firms around the world are doing and where they're having success and where they're not having success. So, so from our standpoint, you know, it's got to be technical, it's got to be the professionals, it's got to be the marketing and the business development teams, it's got to be administration, it's got to be the data stewards, it's got to be accounting, finance. We've got to talk about integrations. And we got to figure out how we're going to train and how we're going to message it, because if people don't understand what the system is designed to do, then they'll form their own perception of what it's designed to do, and that'll dictate what sort of usability we get out of the system. So,
well, plus you want to get them on board early and often, especially like the assistants. They can often make or break an implementation. And so, you know, you want to get them involved early and get their feedback so they feel like they're part of it and they buy in.
I think this aligns with what your slide is here, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So it's got to be a wide group and diverse group. So, so from understanding the business challenges, understanding business goals, there's a whole bunch of things that traditionally in law firms have been done manually or after the fact, or really the hard way, pushing the rock uphill. So one of the things early on as you're starting to assess what the goals and objectives are of the firm, you've also got some things that you know aren't as efficient as they need to be. You've got some things that you know you need to fix or you need to address. So identifying those and prioritizing is really, really a critical part of these projects. You know, new business solutions, again, we'll talk more about this here in just a few minutes, but what are we trying to do? And what systems do we have in-house right now that help support those? And what systems do we need to help supplement what we're trying to do with those goals and objectives? And then if this type of a system doesn't support the strategy and the initiative for the business, then it becomes an extracurricular activity and doesn't get the focus and energy that firms need to have focused on this. Chris?
No, couldn't say it better. Completely agree.
So a lot of times we'll get called in pretty early in the process, and what firms will want to know is, hey, how should we configure these systems? How should we build these systems? How should we implement these systems? What's success? What's along those lines? So what we almost always try to do is drive the discussion back to this needs assessment scenario. So as a firm, is your firm focused on client satisfaction as a primary initiative for this coming year or for years ahead? Is it growth? And if it is growth, in what areas? Is it communications and increasing, supplementing communications with the clients? Do you have an industry focus? White space is something we hear a lot about nowadays. You know, how do we know where we've got traction with our existing clients and what our footprint is from a practice group standpoint with those clients, as well as geographical footprint? So are we representing those clients in all the main geographic sectors of the world, or are we allowing somebody else to come in and do business with our client when we should have that space and we should have that wallet share? Cross practice referrals, competition. I mean, this is something that, you know, 5 years ago, law firms didn't talk a whole lot outwardly about how do we put together a plan for either going after the competition or protecting our clients from the competition. And then economic and political scenarios are changing, and they're changing very, very quickly. And most of you guys have seen what happened in the legal market over the last couple of years with the COVID process. Firms have been busier than ever. So what they've done is they've adapted their practices to help their clients power through some really difficult times. So needs assessment goes a long way, but it really ties back to what are we looking to do as a firm? And then again, how can a solution like this, a platform like this, a strategy like this help support those initiatives? Chris, do you have anything to say there?
Yeah, I think it's worth noting too that because of COVID, we do have, a unique opportunity that the lawyers have been sort of thrown into the technology pool feet first, and they are swimming well. They're doing very well with technology. Lawyers who wouldn't have touched it years ago are now embracing it. And so I think we have an opportunity to make sure that CRM is a big part of that. The only way that we're communicating, like you mentioned earlier, the conferences and the in-person meetings are still hybrid at best. And so digital marketing is what's going to be driving the economy for, at least the next few years in part or in a large part. And so I think getting more technology adoption is a little bit of a benefit, and CRM is certainly going to support the new marketing and BD in the new normal.
Yep, we were together with a practice group lead from a firm out of Toronto last week, and we were down in Florida. And I said, "Well, how long have you been down here?" And he said, "A year and a half." I said, "You've not been back to Toronto at all?" He said, "You couldn't easily move between the U.S. and Canada." He said, "It's been a year and a half since I've had a face-to-face meeting with a client." Right, and practice couldn't be busier. So this technology stuff works. All right, so we brought this slide up, and everybody talks about what does a CRM system do, right? We thought that bringing up these topics and having myself and Chris kind of cover these scenarios will help you guys start to think about when you start to do these assessments and you start to put the strategy together, how can you, what are these things, what do they do, what do they accomplish? So at the very top, too many times overlooked, the concept of contact, company, and client management. I mean, just basic CRM. How can we fix our contact scenario? And Chris, with your data quality piece, this is something that you guys get drug into on almost every project, right?
On every project, yeah. 30% of your data, statistically, it degrades every year. And if you haven't touched it in a while, it could be really terrible. And the implications are even worse, bounced communications and problems with e-marketing. And if you can't, as an attorney, if you can't target and get the right audiences to hear the right messages about your experience and expertise, it makes it really challenging to develop business. So, data quality is absolutely essential, especially, again, when we're doing so much digital marketing now.
Yep, and we've, under the HSO umbrella, we've had an opportunity to step outside of the legal box and into some of the other professional services markets. And when you go into architecture and engineering or consulting or accounting or software consulting, what you hear often is law firms are really good at marketing, e-marketing, marketing automation, communications, things along those lines. I mean, it's where all of us cut our teeth with this type of technology. The reality of it is these technologies have changed so dramatically over the last decade that firms that are still trying to hold on to the way that they used to do things are behind because the technology is so much stronger. So if you have bad data and legacy best practices associated with the way you're doing this, then you're behind. So, Chris, what are you seeing with business development, RFP, pursuit process? What are your clients focused on there?
Well, so it's interesting, when you compare it to other professional services, types of organizations, like accounting firms, they buy CRM for the pipeline. They're not as focused on writing, and all that. But in the last, few years, having fully functional business development tools is on the top of the wish list. You know, we don't want to just do list and event management anymore. You know, 5 years ago, a lot of this stuff was not as well adopted, but now everybody wants to have a pipeline. I think we're still a far cry from having a firm-wide pipeline that everybody, you know, is required. You know, we don't require much in a law firm, but having it to at least track the pitches and proposals that marketing and BD get involved with can be incredibly helpful. Being able to do referral tracking, nobody does it really firm-wide right now, but certainly by group. You know, there are groups where referrals are incredibly important, and we're back down to the, you know, CRM can do 1,000 things, and you do different things with different groups. But we're seeing a lot of need also for experience tracking to respond to RFPs and proposals.
Yeah.
A lot of that.
Yep, exactly. So this next line item I put in here, which is the client and matter practice area lawyer communications. So again, you mentioned trying to get lawyers to put activity into the system, virtually impossible. So fortunately, there's technologies that are out there in the marketplace right now that allow us to passively gather statistics associated with the way lawyers are communicating. And by gathering that metadata, that core information about lawyer communications, emails out, emails in, appointments, phone calls, Teams meetings, things along those lines. By gathering that core data and not looking at the details of the actual messages themselves, just the statistics. What this does is it gives the firms the ability to understand whether communications with their key clients, their key contacts, their key pursuits, their key growth initiatives, is that trend trending up? Is it flat, or is it trending down? And really, really valuable information from an activity tracking, statistics tracking scenario. Next item is client teams. Chris, have you done a project in the last 10 years that didn't involve a client teams initiative?
Yeah, or industry teams. Yeah.
Relationship intelligence, again, this word, it gets used way too broadly, but the fact of the matter is law firms are relationship businesses, and understanding relationships, where they are and where they're not, as it relates to contacts, clients, potential clients, the industry space. And if you don't understand it, somebody else that you're competing against, they're looking at it and they're studying it and they're analyzing it and they're using it to benefit the growth and direction of their firm. So Chris, you mentioned experience and qualification, right? So understanding who's the best person to put forward in a pursuit is super, super important these days. And all of this stuff folds into something that you hear groups talking about more and more now, which is practice intelligence. And practice intelligence just doesn't have one definition. It changes based on what your firm is looking to get out of this type of a platform to support your business requirements. Chris, did I miss anything there?
Yeah, I think you've touched on a lot of it, Whit.
All right, so I mentioned the data piece a couple of times, and I mentioned that we're going to be doing a separate session on this because as we started putting together the presentation, it became crystal clear to us that this is something that requires its own focused sector. But user adoption is different these days. You'll hear us refer to consumption, right? Which is how often are people going to this system, either on their mobile, on their tablet, on their regular PC? How often are they going to the system to consume information? And that is how we want these users to be relying on the system. This relationship intelligence, so being able to understand a 360-degree view of your clients, of your contacts, of your industries, of your practice groups. I mean, that's just critically important. So it's virtually impossible to get these two things without being able to harvest, integrate, synchronize, aggregate data from these other systems internally. And now what you'll hear us talk about in the integration and the data session is how do we supplement the information that we have internally with content that's available out on the web. So everything from LinkedIn to D&B, and again, we'll go into more of that in more detail, but firms have gotten very, very wise. They've realized they don't have all the data internally. So how can we supplement that information with information that's available with external content?
And you'll hear, why can't we do a simple thing like pull a list of our clients in the energy industry? Well, it's not as simple a thing as you would think, because that information has got to be categorized and tagged. If you don't do the integrations, you don't know who your clients are in the database. If you don't add external data or enhance it with data stewarding, then you don't know what the industries of the clients and prospects are. So not as easy as you would think.
Super. Okay. So this next discussion area is something that that again, your clients rely on your team really, really heavily. So how do we measure success? Prefaced by, remember, this project doesn't end on April 1, right? So how do we measure ongoing success? So Chris, I'd love you to walk us through what you do with your clients on this.
Well, I mean, it's different for every client. And I'm a big believer in metrics for success. CRM success can and should be measured, but figuring out what you want to measure and what are your metrics, it's going to be different for every firm. You got some very basic ones like, web analytics and deliverability and bounces, a lot of e-marketing types of tracking. But, are we going to enter BD activities? Are we going to look at, attorneys entering or actually going into the system looking for information? How are we going to track an opportunity from the initial conversation all the way to did we get a matter out of it? And those are all metrics, that are different. There are different ways to track them. And sometimes you're just going to track proxies for progress during the initial implementation, because at that time, it's not as easy to see what is the value that we're getting out of the system. And the attorneys, who write the checks want to be able to see value from the system. So you may have to come up with some other metrics at that period of time. But overall, that's part of the needs assessment, is to figure out how do we define success and then how do we measure it.
Yeah, and simple things like number of contacts by lawyer, number of contacts by practice group, number of contacts by geographic location, and then how does the relationship that the firm has across multiple employees with those contacts, how does that grow the relationships? And then when we do a lateral hire or we do a merger, all those contacts that come in, how do we take the core, hey, we're bringing in 2,500 new contacts. How does the expanded relationship associated with how the firm is connected to those contacts, how does that look from a metric standpoint? So too many times firms start with a static number of contacts and they don't think about the fact that those contacts, they're going to change, they're going to move to different organizations, the relationships, and they're going to either expand or contract. And it's really, really important to be able to keep track of that and understand, are we doing a good job of our outward reach and tracking the information from that standpoint? Another scenario that we learned outside of legal, actually in architecture, engineering, and construction, is this concept of zippering. So you've got senior lawyers, you've got junior lawyers, and you've got young lawyers. So same thing is happening at your clients. So how do we make sure that our contacts are aligned with the same level of contacts with our firm? So from that standpoint, it's a really, really good strategy to have a good bit of focus on. So business development activities, firms forever didn't want to track this information, right? And today, it's an essential part of the health of the business, is keeping track of what our goals are from a growth standpoint, and where are we going to get that growth? Are we going to get it with existing clients? Are we going to get it with net new clients in the same industry? We're going to get it new geographic expansion. What are our plans? Net new vertical sectors. So understanding all those things from an assessment standpoint goes a long way. So timelines and milestones, Chris. I wanted to put this in here and I wanted to talk about it, but it really ties back to your rollout strategy that we're going to be talking about in the future, right?
Yeah, I think we can save that one for another day.
Perfect. Okay. So from a summary standpoint, how do you organize someone's thoughts about what the strategies look like?
Yep. So, pick the whole goal of this is to just get, 2 or 3 nuggets that you can use at your firm. Don't reinvent the wheel. Reach out to people for help. The CRM providers, the consultants, and other people in legal marketing will always lend a hand and share advice. Don't forget, figure out what your goals are, get wins against the goals, communicate successes, and just continue to repeat that process. Get all the groups involved, all the stakeholders involved early and often, and be patient. Focus on key things and remember that CRM never ends. Again, so you've got forever to get better at it. So it kind of takes the pressure off. And if you are really interested in getting some more success tips, feel free to subscribe to our crmsuccess.net blog that we publish tips every week on CRM success.
Yeah, and Chris, I'll jump in and echo a couple of points here. So one, patience is huge because all these things, there's a bunch of moving parts associated with them. And if you're not patient and if you're not working closely with your team, then it's going to be difficult to get significant success. And then it ties back to this other comment that you made, which is your small wins and communicating those small wins. Everybody used to think, hey, we'll do a go live party when this thing goes live and the project's done. The reality of it now is if you build momentum on those small wins, it's going to go a long way towards creating momentum, creating cheerleaders, creating momentum that's going to carry the balance of the project and the ongoing success of the strategy. So we need to capitalize on those as quickly as we can. Don't reinvent the wheel. Too many people go into these systems and they listen to the vendors and they try to fix things that aren't broken. So again, back to the assessment piece. What needs to be addressed? What doesn't need to be addressed? How can we support? So from that perspective, try to be patient. Try to not boil the ocean, and focus on the things that support the business as opposed to the general. Hey, we want to expand this scope to include all 99 things that CRM systems do. So, Chris, very, very much appreciated. Thanks for the collaboration on this.
Absolutely, Whit. It's been a pleasure.
Yeah. So.
Really fabulous information, guys. Thank you very much. A lot to unpack there. So everyone keep an eye on your email because in coming soon, we will have 3 more parts of this series and they'll be coming up. So we have a couple of quick questions that popped up in the Q&A box. How do CRM implementations in legal compare to the rest of the different markets?
I think we definitely talked a little bit about that. And Rob, you also may want to put the QR codes up too if people want to connect with us while we're answering the questions. So
yeah, check this out, everybody. You can scan these QR codes and you'll be able to directly connect on LinkedIn with our 2 presenters today.
Yep.
Yeah, so this concept of how law firm CRM implementations compare to real world implementations, there's some very specific scenarios that have a negative impact on the way law firms try to do CRM. And initial thing I'll say is that law firms aren't schooled or educated, haven't been trained on how to do Salesforce automation. So this concept of CRM is not a native law firm technology stronghold. So in most cases where we're involved, it's fairly net new implementation of technology that they've not had success with in the past and they don't understand. So it's not unusual for Chris to go into a meeting and for the clients to say, hey, Chris, we've hired you because you've done this for other firms. We don't know exactly what we need. Actually, we don't know anything about what we need. We need you to tell us what we don't know. Tell us what we need to be asking. The other piece on this CRM scenario in law firms is the security and the lack of sharing. I mean, that the barriers come down a little bit, but it's still at the heart of things. Lawyers they're uncomfortable and they're unsure about sharing information. Your thoughts, Chris?
Yeah, well, and the inability to mandate anything in the law firm is always a fun one too, because everybody's basically, if you're a partner, you're an owner, and so you have to really go over and above to get people to want to use the system. They've got to find value or they're not going to use it. And you combine that with the hesitance to share and all of that. We're still also not doing collaborative business development and opportunity tracking at the firm-wide level like some of these other organizations do. They are really focused on it. But again, it comes down to, everybody kind of does their own business development and there's not a lot of accountability to other people, sometimes within a group, but certainly not firm-wide, typically in law firms.
And you alluded earlier to accounting firms. So, the big four, those groups are serious business development, serious industry, serious client team. They understand how this type of technology or this type of strategy can be leveraged for growth. So they're very, very well educated on relationship intelligence, practice intelligence, white space identification, trends with existing clients, again, whether they're trending up, whether they're flat or declining. So, so from that standpoint, we don't see enough of that yet in legal, although we're starting to see more and more firms that are adopting strategies that we see outside of our legal community. And that's really been healthy for the legal marketplace. It's been healthy for organizations that are involved in this technology. And it really goes a long way towards helping to really establish what these types of systems can be used for in the legal marketplace.
Yeah, but remember, Whit, we may not be there yet in some areas of legal, but we've got forever to get better with it.
We do, because it doesn't stop anymore, does it, Chris?
Never ends.
Rob, do you have any other questions that came through? That was a good one.
We have no other questions. It looks like you covered
Super.
everything.
All right,
Well,
you guys have been wonderful.
thanks, everybody. Keep an eye on your email for links to the presentation and the slides, and also notification of the upcoming sessions. And thanks for coming.
Yeah, thanks, Rob. Thanks, Chris.
Thanks,
Everybody have a
everybody.
great day.
Bye.
Bye.